Good morning. Welcome to our virtual broadcast here at First Unitarian Church of Toledo. We're so glad you could join us today. As far as announcements, we would love to welcome all of our regular members and also any visitors to our virtual coffee hour after the service. If you are a visitor, go ahead and let us know when you arrive that, hey, I'm new. I'd love to be a part of this conversation. Also, if you have any updates you'd like to add to our directory, you may send those to Letha Sackman at leitha77@yahoo.com. Put directory in the email subject so she knows what it's about.
Our opening words by Susan McGinn call from beyond. From beyond the playful summer clouds, beyond the earth's thin blue line, from beyond the bright moon and meteor showers, we hear the call to look and listen carefully, to turn away from a world that buys and sells happiness, to fully experience the luring whisper of your heart's truth. Why not today? Why not now? We are here and together at home in this evolving place, home in this ever-changing breath and body, home in this dewy, rainy morning, even as it reaches toward a hot but wet high noon. We hear the call from far beyond and deep within, and we do not hear it alone. Come, let us have our Sunday service together.
As we light our chalice today, we'll hear words by Amy Carol Webb, Sacred Unknowing. We light this flame for the art of sacred unknowing. Humbled by all that we cannot fathom in this time, we come into the presence of what we do know. Perhaps the only thing we can ever know, that love is now and forever, the only answer to everything and everyone in every moment.
And now please join me in reciting our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now please join us from your homes in some congregational singing. We have hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us, and we do have lyrics on the screen. story time with our religious educator, Kristen Olson.
So it's August, so I start thinking about going back to school. And here is the story I found in our Tapestry of Faith, but that's in our uua.org. It's called A Sea of Pink by Elsa Davy Pierman. Scott was nervous on his first day of junior high school. Junior high started with 5th grade in his town. He was going to be among the youngest kids in school, and everything was new to him. He had loaded his backpack with all the things on his back to school list, his favorite lunch and snacks. He even wore his favorite pink t-shirt for good luck. When he got off the bus and started walking into the school, he realized how big the 7th and 8th graders were. He sure hoped he'd hit his growth spurt soon. He didn't see any of his friends. Inside the school, he followed the signs to a new homeroom, room 205. Suddenly, he felt himself being slammed into the lockers on the side of the hall. When he looked up there were at least 5 older kids looking down at him. "Hey, girly boy," the tallest one scowled. "Boys don't wear pink in this school, you hear?" "Yeah," said another with really deep voice. "And if you do it again, you're gonna get a beating." The first boy grabbed him by the backpack and lifted him off the ground. A teacher's voice called, "Break it up, keep moving." The gang of boys moved off. Scott looked up. It didn't seem as if the teacher had even seen him in the middle of that. But several other students did. 2 equally tall boys came walking over to Scott. He started to walk away, but one of them put out his hand. "Hey man, it's okay. I'm Travis." "I'm David," said the other boy. "We saw what happened back there. What did those kids say to you?" Scott told them what happened and the threat they'd made. "That's ridiculous," said Travis. "You can wear whatever you want to this school." Travis and Davis walked Scott to his homeroom. "We'll be keeping an eye out for you, Scott," they promised. That day after school, Travis and Davis went back to David's house. "It makes me so mad that a few bullies tell everyone what they can and can't wear. We should do something about that," said David. "Yeah, but what can we do?" asked Travis. "We could tell the teachers," David suggested. "Yeah, but they still do it on the bus or recess or after school," said Travis. "We need to take it to the people," David suggested. "Yeah," said Travis, a look of excitement growing on his face. "Hey, I have an idea. Let's ask our friends if they'll wear pink on Monday." "Yeah," smiled David, "not just our friends, but everyone." "Excellent," grinned Travis. "I can see it now, a sea of pink." They called their friend Adam to tell him the plan, and he suggested they go to the mall to buy a whole bunch of pink t-shirts. They asked their friends to chip in and bought 75 t-shirts for kids who didn't have pink. Then they decided to send the word out to everyone in the school. Just about everyone was on Facebook. The word spread fast. That next Monday, David and Travis were at school early with their boxes of 75 pink t-shirts. Many kids got off the bus with pink t-shirts on, and those who didn't got to take one from the boxes. Travis and Davis also brought pink fabric, and some kids used it to make pink armbands. One kid brought a pink basketball to recess. At least 415 of the students in the school, over half the kids, both boys and girls, wore pink. That day, the school bullies were mad. They gave the kids in pink dirty looks, and one of them even threw a chair in the cafeteria. But people just laughed. The bullies knew that the boys had gotten their message across, and the message about bullying and people looking out for each other. It made almost everyone in the school feel happier. And what about Scott? He wore his favorite pink t-shirt to school that Monday, underneath his sweatshirt. When he got off the bus and saw how many kids wore pink, he took off his sweatshirt and wore his good luck t-shirt proudly. The end.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you so much. And now we actually have Bonnie Rowe back for our anthem today is Andantino by Aram Kachatourian.
Thank you, Bonnie. Now, please join me for a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. This week, I've been thinking much about John Lewis, somebody who completely embodied what it is to be American in the best sense, I think. Somebody who protested wrongs during the civil rights movement and was beaten by police for taking part in protest. But he continued to fight, to work for social justice. He ran the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee for a time and did other organizing work as well. He was eventually elected to Congress, and he served long and well. He made good trouble throughout his life. And it really says something when, during this pandemic, decisions were made for his body to lie in state in the rotunda of the United States Capitol, in the Georgia Capitol, which was his adult home, in the Alabama Capitol, which was his childhood home. And for him to be honored with a funeral with the previous presidents of the United States speaking this week. So John Lewis is in our memory, and may we do the work of good trouble that he did as well. Here in Toledo, we remember, or we think of, members of our congregation, many who have been engaged in illness with cancer, some being treated surgically, some recovering from cancer, others facing a very hard time right now. And they are all in our thoughts, as well as the people not just in Toledo, but all over the world, who are facing the challenge of COVID-19, having the illness, some having very tough terminal disease from it, others able to recover, many of us trying to avoid infection with social distancing, with use of masks, and in other ways. And also, I have a hope that those who are resisting the reality of this do come to their senses. There are also joys in the congregation as well, and we can celebrate. For our reading today, this is Brick by Brick by Meg Barnhouse. Meg is the minister at First Unitarian Church of Austin, Texas. All summer, workers have been building a brick wall along the road by my neighborhood. Against the brutal heat, they stretch a tarp overhead to get a little shade. I've watched them take bricks in their dusty brown hands, one by one, butter them thickly with mortar, line them up, and tap them down row by row. One man who looks to be in his 70s is the leader. His skin is the color of bittersweet chocolate. His beard is gray. Slender and tall, he moves from one group of bricklayers to the next, reaching and bending, looking like a heron in a marsh. When he pauses, he stands very straight. I see him teach the others how to do the work. He stoops over to look at a line of bricks, hands on his thighs, inspecting the work. Sometimes as I drive by, I see him put his hand on the back of the person he's teaching. Often they are both smiling. He looks like he loves what he's doing. I wonder how he can love building walls day after day, handling bricks, teaching the art of laying bricks. Is it the teaching he loves? Seeing how his students learn what their styles are, how their work shows their character? Does he love the wall itself? Does he know about when it'll be done? Does he look forward to seeing it finished? Or does he love the process, the feel of the bricks in his hands, the squish of the mortar, the challenge of making the symmetry of pillars and arches, the geometry of it? I think from the look on his face that he loves the process. I imagine that he never thinks about the end of the project, the completion of the wall. I think he will go on to the next wall as if it were just a continuation of this one, then the next one and the next, and never be bored. I want to be like that, and I am, I guess. In my job as a minister, the bricks are stories. I hear stories of family and work, stories of loss and reconciliation, stories of rejection and disaster, illness and healing, birthing and dying. I tell stories every Sunday and in between, teaching, challenging, confessing, inviting people to learn and laugh and think. Brick by brick, story by story, we build a church, seeing the patterns, the symmetry, the plain joy of setting one story on the other, sustained by the strong and beautiful structures they make. We will never be finished. It's okay. Let's observe 1 minute of silence.
reading today is called Pandemic by Lynn Unger. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling, give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live.
Taylor Swift has a new album. Album review: Taylor Swift, a pop star done with pop. New York Times, July 26th, 2020. On Folklore, a quarantine album made largely with Aaron Dressner from The National, she swerves away from her last few releases, embracing atmosphere rock and other characters' points of view. And Beyonce has a new film to accompany an album. Pop Culture: What to Know About Beyonce's Lion King-inspired visual album, Black is King, Washington Post, July 31st. Those are arts and entertainment stories from just this past week. I don't buy the albums of Taylor Swift and Beyonce, and I don't seek out news about those musicians, but they're influential in pop music, not just as performers, but in advancing popular culture. So I do want to know a little bit about their music and their work. Pop culture is part of the world I want to keep up with. And arts and entertainment is a category that has been close to me throughout my life and work. So when I see stories in the New York Times and the Washington Post, two newspapers with digital editions that I subscribe to, headlines that appeal to me in some way, I tend to mark the articles to save and read later. I do that more than I can comfortably keep up. And in more than those two newspapers, so my reading list grows. It reaches the point where I need to catch up, see if older stories still interest me, read a few, discard others. Maybe you do that too. Perhaps not with arts and entertainment or any of the other areas I'll be talking about on Sundays this month. But do you save articles from newspapers and magazines, both stories you've read and liked and want to keep so you can reread or use it for a project, and stories that look like they might be interesting because of the content or the writer or the details, and you intend to read them when you have time? Or is there another waiting list in your life? Well, I'm bringing you along with me this August for catching up. Sermons I'm preaching on past news while I'm planning ahead for the services in the coming church year. However, we have it for lessened risk during the COVID-19 pandemic. I give summer services a different approach. It's the church year in between time, And so far, I've taken some leave over the summer, so I kind of eased back into leading church services and writing and preaching sermons with these series. In 2017, I based July services on the bestseller lists, which meant sermons on a John Grisham novel and comedian Kevin Hart's memoir, on the movie Cars 3, and the pop song Despacito as interpreted by Justin Bieber. In summer 2018, I've lost my place. Happens with reading lists, doesn't it? In summer 2018, I looked at one week's New York Times bestseller list and other aspects of publishing and media, printed, in sound, and on the screen. Last year, I preached on major religious civil rights, building the beloved community songs from African Americans. Lift every voice and sing, we shall overcome, and a change is going to come. This year, the concept is catching up with my news clippings. Catching up is inspired by what you might call my unread reading list. It's the news articles, social media posts, and even videos that I have bookmarked but not gotten around to reading or seeing. So catching up is a way to make me look at the list and attempt to read my way through, rather than just looking at the newest news and adding even more items to the list. I'm not great at reading things at the time rather than hitting the save button, so I'll be seeing how relevant my saves are and if I am indeed catching up. For me, the forever catching up is reading, trying to be informed. Sometimes it can be frustrating only having the headlines and not having the time, or more to the point, the time management, or maybe the motivation to keep up. Which leads to a New York Times article from June 23rd that I just got to. Letter of recommendation, this time management trick changed my whole relationship with time. But time and I seem to have coexisted okay without the Pomodoro technique that Dean Kissick wrote about, of a regular schedule of 25 minutes on a single topic, followed by a 5-minute break. Doing that with all of your tasks throughout the day. The point being a forced stopping time so you can move on. Does that mean I should present a 25-minute sermon when in summers I try to be a bit more brief? Or that the entire Sunday service should be 25 minutes long? You don't master a technique just by reading about it in a newspaper. For catching up, it would be too much for you, too much for me, I know, just to give the headline and a summary of all the readings I have saved. Though that might make for kind of a meditative chant in a headline scroll. My catching up isn't like a book report either, a summary of what I read. Maybe it's a way to keep the news with me and to have arts and entertainment when I can't be at plays or exhibitions or in libraries immersed in the experience. Arts and entertainment goes to the first Unitarian Universalist source from which we draw our living tradition, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit. We get that direct experience on more than one level too, as the writers and composers turn that experience into art, then interpreters of the art, actors, producers, gallery curators, and so on, put their own experience into it, and then we as audience members experience that presentation too. And yes, we know that the arts and entertainment too present words and deeds of prophetic people which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love, the second Unitarian Universalist source. Look, for example, at the literature of Toni Morrison. Her writing touches all those terms, as does news, though perhaps rarely with well-written and presented journalism. As a minister, I follow news. There's a saying attributed to the theologian Karl Barth that goes something like, preach with the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. And I often try to do that Unitarian Universalist humanist style, which doesn't necessarily mean that I follow Barth's advice to interpret newspapers from your Bible. But I do give some moral context for social justice or spiritual comfort. And it's more than the newspaper. For me, it's like the Bible in one hand, a newspaper in the other, and the internet booted up. There's the New York Times and the Washington Post and our hometown Toledo Blade. Magazines like The Atlantic and The New Yorker and websites like Huffington Post can give context beyond the daily news, as can Slate, the online magazine whose CEO, Dan Check, grew up in the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Brooklyn, New York, when I was an active member there. And there are religion news sources too, both in a larger view and Unitarian Universalist. Then we have Facebook and Twitter and other social media and the news clippings my friends and people I follow share. We won't even get to the books. As a congregational minister who preaches sermons regularly, I have to follow the news, know what the conversations are, see the zeitgeist. But there's so much out there that my reading list goes beyond capacity. I expect yours does too. For this really isn't for ministry, but to try to be aware beyond immediate concerns. So your knowing about the ways of the world might also be a bit shy of complete when you have family, health, and career to deal with, and your reading just sits on the table untouched. Was there ever a time, even in childhood and the larger picture didn't concern you, when you and the world were fully in sync? Think about your waiting lists, the ones that don't even have the priority of a to-do list, but things you save that you want to get to at some point. Maybe it's your library, where long past have you read all those books and you wonder if you'll ever get to them. Maybe even ask why you keep them. Like my wanting to be informed, but often only having the ability to see a headline and not know the details. What do your waiting lists say about you? Or it could be a recipes file you want to cook your way through, or the laundry piled up, or the medical care you need but can't yet get covered by insurance. All the lists aren't good and nostalgic. What this catching up series comes to is not a review of what was happening in arts and entertainment while time passed by, and even not so much the particular areas of interest to me personally and to how I live ministry, books published, the creative life, what is pop, for example, and how others share their ideas and ologies which translates for us to theology, but maybe a recognition that to live a full life, we read about others' lives and work because we can't do everything that we ourselves would want. A little bit fantasy life, perhaps some bookmarking of what we might see, hear, or read that could make our lives, or at least our moods, better. We can get encouragement, advice, and live experiences vicariously. Lists can be important, but I think they'll remain secondary to actually living, which will keep the lists in existence. I'm not at all caught up, but I'm present with you. And that's one of the ways real life is better than the reading life. What about you? Has the at-home time of the pandemic lengthened or shortened your lists? Do what you can, and know that even required reading can sometimes be gotten around. Live your life, be in the world, and do what you can to learn more about life, the universe, and everything, even if it's just trying to catch up by reading headlines. So be it.
Thank you so much. Today's virtual offering can be made either virtually on our website at uutoledo.org by clicking on Give and then clicking on Online Giving, or you can send in the old-fashioned way to our address here on Glendale at 3205. We love to invite you to take a minute to reflect on why this church is worth that investment for you and what this community means to you. And as much as you're willing and able, we do appreciate those donations.
And now, coming soon, what's up for next week? Well, our 10 a.m. Spiritual Adventures Forum, I believe, is Sandra Kozak-Sills speaking about the Unitarian Universalists General Assembly. I noticed that there was a little scheduling confusion in that that was listed for this week in our order of service, but an email I got has it for next week. So it is either that or something about covenant in our church. One or the other, it will be Sandra leading. And then our 11 a.m. service is part 2 of Catching Up, which is on media and politics. Nothing going on there, is there?
And again, we'd love to invite you to our coffee hour virtually immediately after today's service on Zoom. Especially if you're a visitor, drop on by, say hello. We'd love to get to know you.
And this is the
Oh, yes.
Zoom number and password for the meeting. Our closing words are by Barbara Rohde, The Miraculous Pitcher. During the hot Nebraska summers of my childhood, I spent hours high in my treehouse devouring the books I found in the small collection my parents had acquired from the estates of various relatives. One of my favorites was a wonder book, Nathaniel Hawthorne's retelling of classic myths. My favorite of those stories was The Miraculous Pitcher, the story of Baucis and Philemon. This elderly, poor, but generous-hearted couple invited 2 gods disguised as beggars to come into their cottage to rest and eat. The gods keep asking that their bowls be replenished, and the old couple becomes sad and embarrassed because they know the pitcher is empty. But the gods show them otherwise. No matter how often they pour from the pitcher, it is always full. I suppose that as a child, what I liked was the thought of possessing such a pitcher. Much later, I realized that in some sense, I did. The story of the miraculous pitcher seems to be telling us that in the realm of the spirit, there is no such thing as a non-renewable resource. That is an important concept. Most of us have it backward. For centuries, we have had it backward. We have believed that material resources are infinite, but the resources of the Spirit need to be hoarded with care. We act as if the supply of oil can go on forever, but that there are limits to the amount of love we can give away. How often I have found myself closing off from people in need because I was afraid of being spiritually drained, only to find myself in the driest of deserts. We have arrived at a time in our history when we are beginning to realize that this planet is our only home. We can no longer make a mess of the place where we are and then move on. A species can come to an end. Resources can be used up. All growth is not a sign of health. But I suspect we doubt more than ever the truth in the story of the miraculous pitcher, or the loaves and the fishes. We find it hard to believe that we will find the spiritual nourishment to meet the needs of this chaotic age. The wisdom of the centuries and our own experience tell us otherwise. If we do not let our fears have dominion, we may discover that in the midst of pain, we find inner strength. In the midst of bewilderment, we find inner clarity. In the midst of nourishing another, we find ourselves nourished.
Our Sending the Flame is The Glove in the Subway by Jane Rani Rzepka. A one-paragraph newspaper article describes a subway platform during the morning rush hour at Grand Central Terminal. A train pulls in, a well-dressed woman gets off. Before the doors close, the woman realizes that she is holding only one of her leather gloves. She looks back into the train and spots the matching one on the seat. It is obviously too late to dash back to retrieve it, so with a cavalier shrug, she flings her arm out and the doors about to close, tosses her glove onto the seat alongside its mate. The doors shut and the train pulls away. What a great image. One could use it, I suppose, as a metaphor for facing the inevitable, or arguing for an orderly universe, or even, with a little stretch, for sharing the good things in life. But as we move into the summer season, the metaphor that comes to mind is one of letting go. To throw a favorite leather glove into the oblivion of a moving train must involve small pangs of uncertainty, pangs of some degree of loss, pangs of upset. After a lifetime of struggling not to lose our mittens, then our gloves, cavalier abandonment does not come easy. In New England, at least, our pattern is to cling as we cling to our gloves, to routine, to hard work and obligation, all fall, all winter, and right through the 4th of July. But in the summertime, there is a letting go. We close up our schools and our churches, put our overcoats in mothballs, and dust off the swan boats, the lobster pots, and last year's new gas grill. We need that. We need to cast that glove of responsibility back into the train. We need a vigorous and decisive toss about now to free ourselves of the confining gloves of life, even if we love them, and the train's about to leave.